Welcome, everybody, to Vision Untethered podcast, conversations with inspirational leaders. My name is Jill, founder of Savvy, turning overwhelmed founders into empowered leaders. We are building businesses that scale with a fractional C suite, executing vision and increasing business value, helping founder owners realize freedom. I'm so excited to welcome our guest today, Garry Krum, founder and chairman at Agora Consulting. Garry brings decades of experience in mergers and acquisitions, working with business owners to strengthen company value, improve operational readiness, and prepare for successful transitions. Through Agora Consulting, he advises leadership teams on strategic planning, value growth, and advising on exit preparation. Garry, so thrilled to have you. This is obviously a topic and area near and dear to me and to us as a team. So I'm excited that you're here today.
Well, it's huge and appreciate the time to spend with you this morning. This is great. And hopefully
Yeah,
I can add some pearls of wisdom, I guess.
absolutely. Yeah, I know you're full of them. I've already witnessed that. So just got getting to know you over the last couple of months. So I'm curious first and foremost, what inspired your journey? What's your story and background that led to what it is you do today?
Boy, that's a great question. I guess I just found over time, I was a typical investment banker associate doing, working 80, 90 hours a week, flying on an airplane all over the place, not really having a home. But what I found in doing that is that there were just people that they listened to what I had to say and they felt inspired by that. And so that just led to
Hmm.
a career and being able to help people because it really is about, I mean, consultants do consulting work. That's the boring part, right? The
Hmm.
the fun part is getting people, because you can just see it, the light bulb goes off. Ding, they've got it. They've got the idea, and then they can run with it. Prior to that, it's more of a struggle. And so I guess I just felt inspired because watching the light bulbs go off is just
Mm.
a fun thing.
Yeah, that is. It is fun. That's the fun part of what it is we do.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's my style. If I can't have fun, if it's not a fun adventure, if it's not enjoyable,
Yeah.
if I'm not
Yeah.
delivering value, then I don't want to do it. I just don't want to
Mhm.
bother. And so, I enjoy the ability to bring people together to create value, and in that process, enjoy what you're doing. That's a huge part.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What's a failure along the way that you've encountered, and how did addressing that failure shape your strategy, your growth, how you forge ahead?
Boy, there's lots and lots of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
let's learn from failure more than we learn from success.
Hmm.
And
That's
and
true.
I've done hundreds of deals. I've bought hundreds of businesses, literally all over.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, they don't all succeed, and there's reasons for that. I was with a company, public company, and I was the executive VP of corporate development, actually going out and executing the non-organic strategies, right? And our
Hmm.
chairman had this interesting idea to go out and do this business strategy. And in order to do that, he wanted to buy this sort of high-tech machine shop. And nobody really was supportive of the idea. His communication wasn't real good, but since I worked for him, I kind of had to go off
Yeah.
and do the deal. And he says, I'll sell the board, don't worry about it. So we went off, we spent $68 million buying this business. 2 years later, I sold it back to the guy that we bought it from for a buck, $1, because it had
Mhm.
just blown up. It was
Yeah.
terrible, right?
Yeah.
Because and it goes back to all of the fundamental reasons why doing an acquisition or doing M&A, it's all about communication. It's all about clarity of the goal. It's all about clarity of what you're
Hmm.
trying to do. It's all about buy-in. You can't
Right.
do it by yourself. You need the team to come in and embrace the idea and get excited about the idea. And so it
Mm.
really replicated a lot of the reasons why deals fail, and most of them fail. On the
Hmm.
acquisition side, 70% of the acquisitions that are done do not return to the buyer a reasonable
Hmm.
rate of return. It's horrible,
Yep.
right? On the sell
Right.
side, probably about 18 to 20% of buyers that go out to sell their businesses will
Okay.
actually consummate the transaction, right? So
Right.
it's full odds. And so unless
Mm,
you put all the pieces together in the puzzle to create
yeah.
success, unless you're aware of all those things, the chances are you're not going to create much success.
Hmm. Very true. What
But
are
we
some
could
in
we could talk for days about issues, problems, mistakes, blows up. I mean, and
yeah.
good stuff too. So it's just, yeah,
Right.
lots
Yeah.
of things in the past. I've been doing this
Absolutely.
for 45 years. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of experience, a lot of stories.
Mm, I bet. What are some indicators that you see that an owner is too deeply involved in the day to day? And how is that actually limiting the company's ability to scale, to innovate, to have the optionality?
Yeah. Boy, there's lots of indicators, whether the
Hmm.
owner, a real big one is whether the owner is really willing to learn, if they're really willing to change, right? If they're set in their ways and they just want to
Hmm.
do what they want to do, then we're not going to work with them, frankly, because it's not going
Yeah.
to do any good. It's not going to create anything, right? And so that's a
Hmm.
huge, an owner that's kind of a control freak, that's in charge and has his hands in everything, also is
Hmm.
a problem because a buyer coming in buying a business can't buy the buyer's going to leave, right? And after a certain
Yeah.
period of time. And so you have to have an independent, supportive management team that can go at problems, in a
Hmm.
collegial fashion and not have
Right.
somebody be a super control freak. A
Yeah.
lot of times we find buyers, owners of businesses that are just tired. And
Mm.
one indication of that is just the revenue of the business is either plateaued or it's starting to
Right.
cool off. It's just getting less and less and less because they're so tired. They're just not putting the same amount of energy into the business. Although they think they're working really hard, they're just busy.
Right.
Okay.
Mm.
And
Yep.
so that busyness disease is another indication of a company that's struggling because they're spinning their wheels trying to do stuff, but they're not just being very effective.
Right. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Can you maybe share a specific example yourself where you felt trapped by your business, whether it's this one today or in the past, and what strategies you implemented to create that space for scalability?
For my business or for other businesses that we had worked
You
with?
yourself, yeah, you yourself
Yeah.
as a business owner.
Well, so I came from the corporate space, public company space. And
Yeah.
we moved to Colorado 23 years ago. I hung out a shingle and started to consult. And so for many years, I was
Mm,
having fun kind of as a single guy kind of consulting. But after a while,
mm-hmm,
I thought, if the consulting gig is fun, you make decent money. But if you're not consulting, you're not making money. You're not really
mm-hmm,
growing value. And so I thought, well, it would be fun to build a company out of this. And
mm-hmm,
so the thing that you need to do is you need to find a partner. You need to find somebody to come alongside of you that shares the vision, that shares the excitement of building
mm-hmm,
value together. And I tried that with a few people and it didn't work. And then I met
mm,
Aaron Stevens, our current president, and he and I did
mm-hmm,
clicked and he got it and he started running with it. Right. So
mm,
the limitation for me initially was letting go. The
yeah,
limitation for me was giving stuff to Aaron so Aaron could do it. And there are things that he does a lot better than I do.
yep,
And so finding those things and learning those things and turning over those things. And you know this, I'm in a pivot or a movement away from full-time work. I
yep,
don't believe in retirement, but I'd like to continue coaching and supporting. So
mm-hmm,
we have a team now that's come around Aaron and I that's kind of scattered across the country
mm,
to work with us, and they are so good at what they do that it's made it easier for me to step away. Okay.
mm-hmm, yep,
And that's been really fun. But I still find,
yeah,
as I've been doing this for 45 years, I still find myself putting myself into situations where, maybe I don't need to be there, but it's just kind of that habit, that builds up and
mm-hmm,
just is the kind of the normal thing to go do is, and so just, trying to go get into less busy time has been not a struggle, but it's been hard at times. It's just
mm-hmm,
been stuff that's come up with that. But I
mm-hmm,
think, the hardest thing, and we've seen this time and time again with smaller businesses, and I'm saying businesses that are 20, 15, $20 million in size. part of the problem is the owner, it has his hands in everything, and it's difficult for him to let go or she to let go because they're
Hmm.
so tied to it, right? It's their heart that's into it. It's their baby, so to speak, right? And so they have a hard
Sure.
time to let go. And until they do that, the business just won't succeed, especially
Hmm.
if they're contemplating, transitioning the business to new ownership, either family
Yeah.
or
Right.
employees, an outside group or something. Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, you speak a lot of just letting go, and I think that that terminology is used and perhaps overused. And I'm curious what ways you frame it to, especially with the businesses you're working with that are more geared toward this next step and what is next. How do you help them identify the identity and the possibilities of a new them that this requires, that they're stepping into in order to let go, right? Because I think oftentimes we say, oh, just let go, like less control, let somebody else have it. And oftentimes where we swoop back in or where things are a little unsure is a lack then of what next means. Like, what
Right.
is going to be required of me in order to let go? What is my role? What is my identity? And so much of their role and who they are and their identity is wrapped up in what they've been doing for so
Yep.
long. So
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
curious how you guide through that, because there's almost like a triggering response when you tell a business owner you just got to let go, like let go of the vine and let it be.
Right.
So how do you navigate that?
Well, and that's a great point because that becomes a big hurdle in trying to get a business prepared for sale is the owner not
Right.
letting go because they just kind of can get in there and muck it up. So we spend a fair amount of time on the front end working
Mm,
with the owner and talking about two things. One is what are their core values? What are the
mm-hmm,
things that is them that they just feel like if I can't do this stuff, then it's
mm-hmm,
not me, right? But they can do that stuff
mm-hmm,
in other ways besides the business. But we need to identify what those things are so we can channel
mm-hmm.
them down into a path of doing those things that they really like and really
Yeah.
enjoy. And then the second
Right.
thing is you've got to get them to develop a picture. We call it a picture of success. What
Okay.
is your picture of success? What are you trying to achieve? One, in the transition of your business, but two, what do you want to do down the
Right.
road? Because letting go is hard, but if you have
Mm,
something that you really want to you're excited about doing, then it's
yes.
easier for you to let go and kind of move on. So
Yes.
we spend a ton of time with business owners. We actually have a couple of other firms that we work with that come alongside of us that are really skilled in helping business owners understand
Hmm.
themselves and what they want and how to develop
Yes.
value and then letting go of the business and then moving into some sort of other, fairly passionate kind of thing. What are they passionate about?
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. At what point in your journey or working with business owners so often do you realize and do they realize that the systems in place matter more than the hustle, than just the doing more, being busy, staying busy? You talked about that a little bit as well. So, at what point is there some realization that systematizing matters in the long run for building sustainability, for the ability to scale, for the ability to let go?
Right, right. Well, so when we work with the business on the front end, we do a deep dive. We work with the owner. What does the owner
Yep.
really want? How do we position that? But two, we do a sort of an assessment of the business, and the assessment's
Mm-hmm.
twofold, right? One is that it's an assessment of your capability, your current capability, how well you're doing, revenue, financial structure, operations, systems, processes, that kind of. We do a
Yes.
deep dive, but we also look at creatively what other kinds of things could we do to create value, down the road. But we
Yeah.
have some really good systems people that look at finance, accounting, HR, operations, ERP, sales
Mm,
systems, and so forth. Because we talk about words like efficiency and productivity. Just because you feel like you're being productive doesn't mean that you're efficient. And so sometimes tools, systems, processes, procedures help you become more efficient because you understand. And sometimes it's just we're busy because we chase things that waste our time. We're busy
Yeah.
because we fill our life
Yep.
with stuff that feels good. It's busy. We're busy. We're busy. Everybody wants to be
Yep.
busy, but we're not being effective. We're not being
Right.
productive. And so
Yeah.
we have to get at what those things are. And that's part of
Right.
the investment of the business because it comes out through comes out through the cracks in the wood. I mean, it just comes out as you start to observe and see what's going on inside of
Yeah.
business. And most people are kind of blind to it because they're just doing it day in, day out. And somebody coming in new going, why do you do that? Or why do you do it
Hmm.
that way? Right. And it gets people to question to become more efficient at what they're doing. So systems
For
is
sure.
huge. Yeah,
Right.
especially if you're trying to get from, a smaller company, let's say less than $5 million a year in revenue to becoming
Hmm.
a bigger business, $10 million. There's breaks in there where the systems that you were using are no longer effective for
Right.
becoming a company that has 50 employees or 100 employees plus whatever. And so you just kind of get
Exactly.
that. We're modeling that out.
Yeah, absolutely. What helps in that transition and systemization? Many founders then struggle in that shift from being the doer to the designer of the
Mhm.
business, the designing of the systems, and that's the role, right?
Right.
That's the next level that the business demands of them. What helps make that transition for them?
Well, first off, it's understanding where they have strengths and abilities and where they don't. Because
Sure.
you've probably read years and years ago the book The Entrepreneurial Myth, right? The
Hmm.
E-Myth, right? Where
Hmm.
entrepreneurs like they can do everything. I mean, they're just jacks of all trades. They can do all this stuff. But as a business grows, they get to the point where they can no longer do
Hmm.
the accounting. They can no longer manage the sales. They need other people. Then they need systems and process to help them with that. So part
Yep.
of the process is analyzing, on that ownership piece or even on the team piece, what they're really good at and what they're
Hmm.
not good at. And when an
Hmm.
owner realizes that I need help in whatever place, financial management or operations management, then they're much more
Hmm.
likely to bring in some support and help than they are.
Yeah.
And so that's that light bulb going off to say, oh, I need this piece, I need this new thing, and seeing where it can add value and how they can create that. But it's
Yeah.
that learning about where they are skilled and where they're not skilled, because
Right.
nobody can do it all after a certain point. It just gets too overwhelming.
Yeah. Yep. That
Yeah.
makes, yeah, rings true. Yeah.
I
If,
I was sitting across the table from Kurt Richardson, who I don't know if you know, he's the founder and owner of OtterBox, right? And
yep.
so Kurt was telling me the story about, he's building this company and he's going on
Hmm.
down this road and down this road. And he said there's all these roadblocks and all these roadblocks were happening. They couldn't get stuff done and the efficiency wasn't there and on and on. And he says one day
Sure.
the light bulb went off. He said, I'm the roadblock. I'm the
Hmm.
one causing the delays. I'm the one causing all these mistakes because I have to have my hands in some of this stuff. And so that was a
Yeah.
big light bulb moment for him where he said, okay, I've got to let go of all this stuff and letting other people, other solid, credible professionals come in and do this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's really where Otter started to really blow up, was when
Yep.
Kurt realized that he was the problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Realizing and admitting the problem first, that
Yes.
you're the bottleneck. Yeah, absolutely. I hear that all the time.
Yep.
And so let's talk culture. So, culture within the organization can either trap a company around a founder or it can liberate it, right?
Mhm.
Depending on the culture that's developed. So, what intentional steps do you guide, advise business owners take that has contributed to healthy cultures that stand on their own without that owner constantly trapped in it, right? Trapped
Yeah.
by upholding
Yeah.
and championing that.
So, but let me explain this way. It's a little different. So once again, it's kind of getting the owner to realize what's going on. Until the owner kind
Mm,
of gets it, there can't be anything beyond that. But what we do is we talk about
mm-hmm,
doing several things, but let me give you a couple examples. We talk about building good soil. If you think
mm-hmm,
of a farmer, right, and a farmer's out, and if a farmer doesn't have good water, if there's no good irrigation, if the quality of the ground has not been fertilized, if the soil hasn't been prepared, he's going to have a lousy crop, right? And so, how do we as business owners create good soil? How do we give our employees the tools they need to succeed? How do we
Mm,
create a systems and processes and incentive structures and on, right? To make people
yeah.
feel excited and give them the tools to be able to succeed in their jobs. So
Yeah.
that's one question. And we actually spend a lot of time thinking about, what does good soil look like in the financial arena and sales and, people systems and that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
Really
Yep.
important. And then the second thing we talk about, and this is just a few examples, but the second thing we talk about is creating a business where you have unrecruitable employees, where your employees are so excited to work for you and in your business because they have freedom and they've got responsibility and they can create stuff and they can do and create value. And that's what people want, right? It's not so much a paycheck, it's the ability to feel really good about what you're doing. So creating
Hmm.
processes and things in your business so that your employees just they're not going to go anywhere else because they're so excited to stay with you.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What kinds of things do we do to do that? One great example locally is Walker Manufacturing. They have done things in their company where it's hard for people to find a job at Walker because their employees, I think the average tenure is about 22 years at Walker.
Mm,
Average.
yeah.
It's crazy because people,
Right. Yes.
how much efficiency and productivity and fun and excitement and adventure and all of that comes about because the employees have been there so long and want to
Mm,
contribute, want to play. And so
yeah.
just two silly examples, but that idea of creating good soil, right? What does it look like to really create, value and then creating a
Hmm.
system, a structure and process? You think another good example is Patagonia, right? Patagonia, people that work for Patagonia, they want to work for Patagonia. They don't want to
Yeah.
go anywhere else to work for anybody else because the processes and systems and the kind of culture, to use your phrase,
Yes.
that
Right.
Yvon Chouinard created back in the day when he created Patagonia, has
Right.
continued to this day. And that
Yeah.
culture is why people want to come to work for Patagonia. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
pay, it's not necessarily what I'm doing, but it's that fun,
Hmm.
exciting culture that they're becoming part of. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And something that champions it, its way through the entire organization and is owned collectively as well, that the the right alignment in community, people in that organization that align so well compounds upon itself, right? It's not dependent upon any one person to keep making that a reality or having to enforce or having to course correct, because with the right people aligned, with the shared values and that culture and ownership of those systems you talked about, and really championing for the better good of where the organization is going, is a culture that just kind of lives and breathes and takes shape in a way that's so powerful. So I loved what you talked about on that.
Well, and a
Yeah.
business owner really has a lot to say with that because if they're trying to
Yeah.
control, if they're kind of, I don't want to say dictatorial, but if they're kind of demanding and
Hmm.
this is the way it's going to be and stuff, they can create really bad culture. And so you see it, right? High employee turnover and low financial results and just all kinds of issues because
Right.
they just don't understand. And so culture is driven from the top down, but even with a good owner who really cares about
Right.
creating really good culture, it's the
Hmm.
people in the organization that also contribute to that. So it's
Hmm.
a two-way street that goes on.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a fun thing to go in and observe companies with really great employee culture, business culture, because you can just see it, you can just sense it from the time you walk in the door and you meet the gal at the front desk or you meet the guy, in the shop or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
you could just feel it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. It's a whole experience and feeling and yeah, embodiment of just being
Right.
that's different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, the architect or the designer of the business as opposed to being in it. And delegation, while it sounds very simple in theory or easy to do in theory, it feels risky in practice, right? Done right. What's your personal philosophy on letting go while still protecting your vision?
Well, I mean, to me, what I've seen in my own personal life, in my own practice,
Hmm.
that it's very easy to let go when you have somebody come alongside of you that,
Hmm.
that loves what you do, that cares about what you think, and understands what you're thinking, and can take the ball and run. They're
Hmm.
credible, they're capable. I'll just use the silly word, they're loving, right? They're loving of what's going on, and they want to
Hmm.
create that kind of environment. So it really comes down to the people that you hire
Yeah.
that align to what you're doing, that embrace what you're doing and are excited about it, and they get it, right? Then it's easy to let go because it's like, okay, not a problem. But when people come along that resist or struggle or kind of fight you or what have you,
Hmm.
more importantly, you fight them, right? And there's not that freedom, then it's
Sure.
not going to happen. And so then you're going to see
Hmm.
things happen that you don't like. And so the tendency,
Right.
let me pull that back. Let me do that, right? Because then
Yep.
that's the way that you want it to be done. But
Yeah.
if people that see it, that sense it, or they can even do it better than you can, then there's a much more, there's freedom there to hand it off and hand it off and hand it off. And just, the thing, it
Mm.
just begets value. So
Yeah.
that's a big one that I've seen in companies.
Yeah.
So in my own, when I had first couple of people I tried to bring alongside of me to help, grow the business or work with, they just didn't fit. Okay, they
Hmm.
didn't they didn't really get the vision. They understood it kind of conceptually, but they didn't really align, and they didn't align to my style, which is fairly personal. And then when Eric
Hmm.
came around, he just got it. He just really took off with it and started running with it. And so the
Yeah.
more you give people things to do and they just rock and roll, then
Yeah.
you're more comfortable to say, okay, and kind of keep doing that and kind of keep doing that. So it's,
Yeah.
it's not just the owner's fault for being controlling, but it's
Sure.
also the owner's fault for not hiring the right people
Hmm.
to come alongside of you. And if you cast the vision
Hmm.
right, then you'll find good people.
Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it too. I think in people that can do it better than we can. I think there's often this kind of threat or maybe this misconception that we still have to control and manage
Hmm.
within those that we actually bring in alongside us. And so that's often a trap that we see as well is that, you're still looking for a lesser version perhaps of individuals around you in that, and you're going to have to pull them along with you unless you really get down to the the unique abilities and the talents and the interests that you have or don't have, and being honest and real about somebody that can. It's like I want someone in this that could run circles around me. That's who I want doing this, as opposed to, all right, let me then figure out, I have to figure this out first to then understand it and then find the right fit for it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
had a
that's
gal
key.
in I had a gal in an interview many, many years ago when I was in public company and I was, the VP
Hmm.
of corporate dev. And I had this gal that I was trying to hire, and I said, "So what's your job? What's your role? What is your job?" And she says, "Well, my job is to help and support you to do whatever you need done." And I said, "No, your job is to take over my job. Your job is to be so good at what you do that you take over my job. Because if you take over my job, guess what I'm doing? I'm going to go take over somebody else's job, right? It's this
Hmm.
value creation thing. And so that's what you need to do is learn your
Hmm.
job well, that you don't need me anymore, that you take over my job. And that kind of environment, that kind of excitement, that kind of adventure begats value. It just happens because we're all working together then, going down the same road. And there's lots of other
Hmm.
stuff that I can go do. Um,
Right.
so it's a different way, I think, of looking at it. But I think that,
Absolutely.
people ought to have the freedom to really be really who they are, right? And just blow up their own value and feel excited about that and not feel
Hmm.
capped, right, by somebody and what they can't
Exactly.
do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's where, the greatest opportunity, we leave so much opportunity on the table in growth and development of humans and their trajectory and their path if we're limiting, well, here's what it is you do, this is exactly how you do it, we're going to spell it exactly how it needs to be done, and instead ensuring that someone's there to truly own, take it, run with it, innovate it, change it,
Mhm.
right? there's so much power in that and opportunities left on the table when we put it in a box forever that is
Yeah.
dictated so
Yeah.
specifically.
Well, when
So,
you repress people by saying no, by
yes,
saying that
yes.
wasn't good or you failed or whatever, you have to let them flourish. You have to let them be and create. And that's why the
Yeah.
values thing is so important and we talk about it.
Hmm.
It's different from culture. Values are the
Hmm.
things that make you and I tick. So if
Yep.
I hire somebody who is extremely honest, they're like black and white. But I'm kind of this freeloading, guy who's not care that much and everything is kind of gray and it's no big deal and stuff. We're going to
Hmm.
clash. We're just going to
Hmm.
clash, right? And so
Hmm.
you need to find people that align to your values so that when you give them stuff, you know from your value set that they're going to take it and run with it because it's the same value set. So those things are kind of overlooked oftentimes when we hire people. We hire people for their ability to do the job, like an accountant or a bookkeeper doing the work. But people never get fired because, I mean, rarely get fired because they can't do the work. Normally they get fired because there's a value problem. They took and embezzled money or they lied or they did something that was based upon values, ethical kind
Hmm.
of stuff, not necessarily the
Hmm.
job that they do.
Sure. Or even at a much less extreme values mismatch we see all the time with being a team player, collaboration, shared collaboration with others, or even things like ownership within values. How well do you
Right.
step in and take initiative, and those sorts of things are down to core values match in an organization, and they can do the job. They are doing the work, but we start to question then, well, as we've innovated, what's scalable, and the way that this is being done now isn't going to work now for what we need
Right.
today or what we're going to need this to look like tomorrow. So if we can't see the values alignment in somebody that's going to match that, to help drive that, to ensure that they're ahead of, not being pulled along and dragged with it, that's a values misalignment too, that
Right.
is a much less extreme than whether or not they're an honest and person of high integrity. It could be as simple as, yeah,
Time.
there's
Yeah, how much they want to work,
mhm.
whether they're devoted, or what their heart is. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, are you devoted, or are you just waiting to kind of show up and things to look like they did six
Yep.
years ago? And if it's not that way, then you're not going to play along. Then we have a huge misalignment here.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely. That's actually, yeah. I mean, that's what we see more commonly. Yeah. Susie was great here for this many years. And look at the accomplishments. Look at all the work done. Look at where we've gotten to. But now as we start to see what's next, either that's, she's growing along with us. She's all in. She's bought in. She matches with the culture and what makes all of us tick well in order to get us now to here. It's either evident or that's not going to work. So
Yep. Exactly.
love it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Garry, thank you so much for your time, your insight, your wisdom, as always, and sharing that with our audience of visionary founders and business owners. If people want to learn more about Agora and your advisement and exit readiness, where's the best place to get in touch?
Go to our website. Make sure you have the address of that. Website contains contact data and how to reach us and play with us.
Hmm.
That's the best way to be able to do that.
Hmm.
We have a great group. We have three other senior partners in our company that are better at what we do than I am. I mean, I'm kind of a deal guy, right? I'm kind of a simple do the deal. And
Yeah.
these folks are awesome business colleagues and people that have been
Yeah.
done stuff for really wonderful companies. And so I have nothing but really super faith in each one of our partners. So yeah,
Absolutely.
website is probably, and there's lots of information and stuff on the website.
Yep. The website's agoraconsulting.us,
Right.
to clarify for listeners. So check out their value readiness quotient assessment, insights to help build a business that's more valuable, transferable, and future ready. Garry, thank you again so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.